Greetings, Earthlings. Welcome to Nature Obscura, a podcast where nature and the supernatural collide. I'm Marissa.
And I'm Grace. Each week, we share spooky happenings from the great outdoors, from cryptids to curses, ghosts to witches, and everything in between.
In our main story, Grace starts off with the natural history, and then I take you into the spooky side of things. Grace, what eerie or earthy encounter have you had this week?
See, I was dreading this because I actually don't think I have anything this week. I don't have any ghost stories from my house. I feel like I haven't been outside in like a year since I had my baby.
That's totally good. And I was kind of worried about the same thing. Definitely nothing spooky. Ouija board is still sitting in my car. I was going to try and bring that in as a development, but no, it's still just in my back seat. I did have a huge murmur. I think it was just a bunch of starlings outside the other day, which was pretty fun and spooky. They were super loud and chattering all in a tree above my house. And, when I'm saying the other day, that can mean last week or 3 weeks ago. So it was before all the snow. So it was actually raining. So the rain was coming down. It was dreary and gray. And then you have this barren tree filled with hundreds and hundreds of cackling vocal blackbirds. It was really fun. I actually got a clip right before they flew off. So all of a sudden, collectively, they flew away all at once. And I'm just so interested in knowing what birds are sensing when they do that. I'm assuming just one starts it, and then it's obviously just a collective agreement that, okay, they all need to fly at once. But it was so unanimous and just weird because, there wasn't a plane flying ahead. There wasn't anything I could tell that would have alerted them to fly off. Junie didn't run outside or anything. So it's like, okay, bye. But yeah, I'll have to share that clip with you. It's fun. I love murations. Is that what it's called? The large gatherings of those guys?
It's a murmuration.
A murmuration. Okay. I love them.
I know. I wonder if it's just one individual that's like, hey, we gotta go. Like they make a squawk or something. I don't know. That is really cool. And it's beautiful. It's always so pretty. Yeah, the most bird action I've gotten lately is actually we turn on YouTube for Zatara. And so we put it on the big TV the other day, and he just stares at the birds on the feeder. And it's a live stream. And so I actually found myself just watching it the other evening, just like it was TV. And that's one thing where I don't mind if my baby's watching, because it's just birds, It's calm, it's relaxed, and she's getting that ingrained into her head that this is what we do. We watch birds.
She's a baby birder. She's going to be a bird ID prodigy and a baby bird ID prodigy.
She's going to surpass me one day. Today's supernatural site is Old House Woods in the unincorporated community of Diggs, Virginia. Resting along the Chesapeake Bay, this forest is believed to be haunted by more than just the humidity and mosquitoes that plague the area. Before we talk about the haunts, let's talk about the habitat and the wildlife that lives there. Old House Woods itself is a small, 50-acre private property nestled in the coastal region of Virginia, just a little over an hour away from Jamestown, the first permanent English settlement. Indigenous tribes can be traced back in the area for over 11,000 years. This coastal region is known for its ghost forests, and not just the haunted kind. These ghost forests appear as low-lying coastal areas dotted with standing dead trees, a striking visual sign of rising sea levels. Since the mid-1800s, approximately 150 square miles of upland habitat in the Chesapeake Bay region have gradually converted into tidal marshes, a trend that continues to accelerate due to climate change and land subsidence. The loss of forested land is a concern, not only for local communities, but also for the wildlife that depends on these habitats. Native pines and other freshwater-dependent trees are declining under the combined pressures of saltwater intrusion, high tides, coastal storms, wildfires, and invasive species, such as reed phragmites and southern pine beetles. Along the Atlantic coast, estuaries and bays, including the Chesapeake Bay, are among the most hard-hit. As saltwater pushes inland, freshwater-dependent forests die off, leaving behind ghost forests that signal dramatic ecological change. Researchers note that in some areas, these ghost forests are advancing inland at rates of up to several meters per year, gradually transforming once dense woodlands into tidal marshes. For Old House Woods, this means that the forested landscape could eventually give way to marshland, making what was once Old House Woods into something closer to Old House Marsh. Old House Woods is a dense, shadow-choked forest pressed up against Haven Beach, its trees leaning towards the Chesapeake Bay. Locals call it the Osprey Garden, a place where thousands of ospreys call overhead, crying out across the water. Today, it's the largest breeding ground for ospreys in the entire world. But the bay hasn't always been this alive. Back in the 1960s and 70s, the osprey population nearly collapsed. The pesticide DDT seeped into the ecosystem, thinning eggshells, killing off chicks, and pushing the species towards silence. When DDT was finally banned and conservationists stepped in, the birds clawed their way back from roughly 1,450 breeding pairs to nearly 10,000. People around the bay learned to watch them closely. Ospreys are an indicator species. When something goes wrong with them, something is already going wrong with the water beneath them. And lately, the locals are worried again. Researchers have noticed the ospreys slipping into decline. Their haunting cries aren't as common, their nests not as full, and their main food source, the menhaden fish, I hope I said that right, has been steadily disappearing. Menhaden are a main link in the Chesapeake's food chain, a foundation species that supports nearly everything else. They make up 3/4 of an osprey's diet, and without them, the birds are starving. Menhaden have been pulled from these waters since colonial times, ground down into cosmetics, pet food, supplements, stripped away faster than the bay can replace them. Overfishing is a quiet predator, one you don't see until the ecosystem starts to crumble. And in the Chesapeake Bay, that unraveling has already begun. So that to me is all very scary. But Marissa, it's the last time you saw an osprey. I know they're pretty common up here in Michigan.
I feel like I saw one probably a couple months back. They hover around the marsh down the street for me quite often. I feel like they're one of the few raptor species I can actually identify, so I always get excited to see them.
Yeah, they have that really cool streak on their face.
They migrate south for the winter, right?
I actually don't know that. Yeah, I don't pretend to know everything about birds. I just know a lot. Same with you. But I know, remember that park we went to go birding last?
Mhm.
That's kind of in between us. At that park, there's a nesting pair on that big tower. Do you remember seeing that?
Yeah, yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, you can go to that park reliably and see them. Yeah, so I know we both love birds, so I wanted to go into a deep dive on the osprey.
That's really interesting. I actually didn't realize the population decline they had.
Yeah, it's
Um,
crazy. It's kind of been just going up and down, and now it's in the downswing, and populations are actually lower in some areas than they were during the DDT era, which is scary. The tidal lagoon of White's Creek sits nearby, where a lot of activity, paranormal and otherwise, occurs. The region hosts many shorebirds, while the neighboring woods provide refuge for common songbirds. During the winter, snow buntings and purple sandpipers can be spotted. The entire area is considered a great site for watching migrating birds and is part of the Virginia Bird and Wildlife Trails. One bird in particular that I would be very excited to see is the red cockaded woodpecker. Also, I really hope I'm saying that right. Cockaded.
I appreciate your confidence with it, and based on the way it is spelled, I agree with what you're saying.
I've never actually seen this bird, but I love a good woodpecker. And this woodpecker is very interesting because it actually carves its nest cavities into living pine trees, whereas other woodpeckers, they usually will peck at dead wood in the forest, making it one of the few woodpeckers that refuses dead wood. To protect themselves, they peck tiny holes around the nest to make a resin drip down the trunk, creating a sticky barrier against snakes. They live in a tight-knit family group with older offspring helping to raise new chicks, and each bird needs a territory of several dozen hectares. They're also federally endangered, making every one of their carefully carved tree homes critically important.
That's really amazing. I looked it up, like a photo of them. I'm a little underwhelmed.
It kind of looks like a downy or a hairy to me.
Yeah, it does look like a downy or hairy. I mean, I love any woodpecker. I love red bellies, redheaded. I do love a downy and hairy though. I don't know, the name sounded so exciting. I was like, what are you gonna look like? He is cute though. I was looking for a photo of it. The first thing that actually popped up, it looks like It's a research study from the Center for Conservation Bio. It said that they had at one point fewer than 10 individuals spread among 3 breeding groups in the early 2000s. That's crazy. Okay. It looks like it's increasing, but yeah, it's crazy. I'll send you the article. That's crazy. Sorry. I'm saying that's crazy a lot. It's crazy how much I'm saying that's crazy.
That's so crazy.
All right. I'm going to have us dive into the spooky side of things. There is a lot going on with this area.
Yeah, I'm really curious because I didn't look at anything to do with this story. I don't know what we're talking about. I just looked up the animal stuff and kind of went off of what you're doing. So
It truly has everything, I think, but UFOs. So the name Old House Woods comes from the legend of a colonial era wooden home from the 1700s called the Franny Night House, which mysteriously burnt down, leaving no trace of its existence. I did try and look more into this Franny Night House. I could not find any information. I tried searching the public records. I was going deep. I could not find anything actually confirming who Franny Night was, no documentation. But I'm assuming, she's the owner of that house. But almost all resources do refer, to this house as the Friday night house.
that's weird. They wouldn't have any information.
No, I know. I was just like, give me some deeds or paperwork or something, but I guess that just adds to the mystery of the area. So, according to the locals, the house will sometimes reappear as a ghostly image, only to vanish once again. So, not just ghost, but a ghost house.
I love that.
Legends say it spontaneously combusted not once, but twice. The first time, the fire allegedly died out on its own, but the second time, it burned completely to the ground. Some believe the house met its unusual fate because it was built on indigenous burial ground and the graves of enslaved people. The woods have long been considered haunted, a belief reflected in the deep rooted local legends passed down throughout generations. The stories have inspired newspaper articles dating back to the 1920s, as well as research done by doctoral students studying the region's oral history in the 1970s and in more recent years.
So the house is no longer there. It's burnt down, but sometimes people will still see the house.
Yes, like a ghostly version of the house. So it's really strange. So there is a ghost house, but then there is actually also old houses that were in those woods that are still there. There's still at least one, but that's not the old house of Old House Woods.
Gotcha.
Yeah. There are like foundations of old homes that were there, and that's all that's left. And in one paranormal investigative or investigation video, you can actually see them going into one of these houses that is really basically just a shell of a house. And we'll dive more into that later into the episode. So, there are actually several supernatural encounters reported in this area, and the house that appears and disappears on a whim is among the least bizarre. Visitors frequently report glowing orbs drifting through the trees, moving erratically, and disappearing and reappearing without explanation. These flame like lights are often referred to as will-o-wisps when they are seen in marshy or bog areas. They're known to lead travelers astray and even lead them to dangerous areas like within those marshes. In folklore, dating back to the 16th century, these lights are thought to be caused by mischievous spirits or even fairies. These lights could be the signs of spirits roaming the grounds, or for non believers, they could also be caused by rare natural effects caused by swamp gas.
I feel like if I saw one of those orbs, I would definitely follow it. And it would probably lead me astray and try to kill me.
Right. I was really intrigued by this and like the idea of the will-o-wisp. There's even a really beautiful painting done in the 1800s of these will-o-wisps, and I guess another name for them is actually jack-o'-lanterns.
That's curious.
I'm imagining Haunted Mansion 2005, the little orb thing. And isn't it like Elizabeth's ghost leading them? Definitely that sort of situation. I'm intrigued.
That's exactly what I was picturing in my head.
Yeah, and I mean to a marsh? You know I love a marsh. So it's like, yeah, I was gonna go there anyway. You're just accompanying me on my walk to the marsh. The decaying matter that are often present in these marshes and similar environments can release gases such as methane that may spontaneously ignite, creating these strange flickering lights that people are reporting to see.
My first thought would be that they were lightning bugs rather than the gas igniting.
And, many of these strange lights have been seen away from the wetlands, though, deeper in the uplands and even near the road. And there's no decaying matter in that area that would be able to cause this effect naturally. So, A lot of the blog posts I've seen, paranormal investigations included, a lot of the activity can occur just by you walking down the road, which is the best course of action. I don't know if I've said this already, but the Old House Woods itself actually is a private property. So that dense 50-acre portion right there is private property. So a lot of people will just walk the road and like the nearby beach that also has activity.
I'm curious if the owners know, like, the reputation.
The owners, I feel, definitely have to be aware. The road itself is even called Old House Woods Road.
Gotcha. They probably get a lot of visitors, people trying to come into the woods and whatnot. That would be annoying.
There was actually a Old House Woods documentary that came out a few years ago, and, doing my due diligence, I had to join the Matthews County, Virginia Facebook discussion group to figure out, what's going on. And a lot of the residents were excited about the new documentary, and others were saying things like, we're gonna have to put up more no trespassing signs and sounding a little bit more frustrated. So it really is embedded in that region. Everybody seems to know about it. And actually, I was reading through the comments of people's stories that had been passed down from their grandparents and that sort of thing. They had, and different things they had encountered in the area. And some have actually had first-hand encounters that were told to them growing up all their lives. It's really kind of fun covering an area on the East Coast just because the history is so much older, even compared to Michigan. Like, we don't really have as much stuff occurring in the 1600s. I'm going to be really happy when we go to a different area of the globe where there's a lot more older stories to draw from because, it's so fun. Buildings have been around since the 12th century and things like that. We don't really get that here in the US.
I love seeing that, like the old houses with just the foundation. It's so eerie, but also I like to imagine what used to be there and all the people that went in and out of that house.
So, visitors report a strong sensation of being watched or followed, with many describing the overwhelming feeling of an unseen presence observing their every step. Others have reported dense fogs drifting across the roads, reappearing and disappearing without warning. One individual featured in that Old House Woods documentary that I mentioned earlier described a fog that vanished suddenly, leaving behind strange, oblong, translucent white orbs rising into the treetops. The fact that they're oblong is so weird to me. I've never heard an orb described as oblong, so I'm very intrigued.
Yeah, I don't even know what that would really look like. Like, I know what that word is, but I never pictured an orb that shape.
No, and it happened not once during their drive, but twice. So the fog was vanishing, coming on so thick that they had to actually stop the vehicle and wait for the fog to pass. It cleared, they started again, and then it happened again, so a little bit further down the road. And, they've driven this area hundreds of times before, I'm assuming, and nothing has happened like it before or since, as, they are local to the area.
Mhm, and I feel like having one time, that's weird, but happening twice, that's strange. Something's happening.
Yeah, because I mean, you're by the bay. The woods, does border right up to the bay there. So it's like, okay, you have fog rolling in, but for it to be so dense and being a local to the area, you're probably familiar with the kind of normal ebbs and flows of that town, weather-wise. So it's just strange. Paranormal investigators that have visited the area in hopes of gathering evidence reported mysterious lights in the woods, car doors and trunks opening on their own, and phantom footsteps. Photographs taken during investigations show strange phenomena. One image contains what was described as ectoplasmic mist, while a video still captured a streak of light moving through the frame. A really big reoccurring trend in a lot of strange encounters people have had in this area are involving their cars. So, car doors or trunks either opening on their own and slamming shut on their own. Other reports mention a sulfur like odor at the same moment an investigator felt threatened and unable to breathe. Additional investigators have reported similar experiences, including car doors slamming shut on their own and strange sulfurous smells. I have to do a little disclaimer here. Marshes are known to occasionally produce odors due to natural decomp of organic matter. It happens primarily just in low oxygen environments, and the stench can be overwhelming.
Sometimes it's about the timing, though, of those smells.
Right. If it's accompanied by, feeling threatened and unable to breathe, and then you're smelling the sulfuric, gross smell at the same time, that is quite a coincidence. And it is also common for there to be that weird sort of rotten egg smell in those bogs or marshes, which can sometimes be really strong. I've definitely been to bogs or marshes where it's very noticeable, including, I think, that one trip we did to Indiana, the birding trip. I'm pretty sure that bog there was pretty rotten eggy, if I remember.
Yeah, I remember it very clearly.
But I did not feel like I was being watched or felt threatened and unable to breathe, so I was good.
Exactly. No.
In Old House Woods, there lies that abandoned house, as I mentioned earlier, though, not the same as the namesake of the woods. Virginia Paranormal Investigations have recorded videos on YouTube where they have sightings of shadow people in the road and along the woods, as well as reports of voices in the forest. In Old House Woods, there lies that abandoned house I had mentioned, different from the one it's named after. The house was occupied as recent as the 1970s, and we're not going to spend too much time on this, but it has had strange phenomena reported and occurring during both the investigations, and there's encounters from when people actually lived in that house that I was able to find online. The paranormal investigations team that was out there recorded knocking and grumbling coming from inside the vacant home with no logical explanation to be had. Some of the blog posts I saw were things like, their dad had owned land out there, or they knew someone, they were best friends with someone that had lived there and they had sleepovers growing up. But there was definitely descriptions of weird energy being out there, but the thing that scared one commenter the most was something along the lines of the humidity and the large sparrow-sized mosquitoes. That was another huge thing. People are just as scared of the ghost out here as they are of the mosquitoes. The mosquitoes came up a lot during my research.
I don't blame them. Mosquitoes have killed more people in the entire world than anything else, even religion.
Even ghosts. Ghosts have killed less people than mosquitoes, so valid. There were a couple, on the blog there was, on the blog someone like, "Oh, my friend grew up here, and I would spend the night sometimes. There was rocking chairs moving and shadow figures in hallways." Good old classic haunted house stuff. Sightings occur throughout the area, from deep in the forest to the water's edge, with some apparitions carrying lanterns. Others have reported seeing skeletal figures. Yes, like skeletal Pirates of the Caribbean style skeleton ghost. I immediately, when I saw this, was like, "Yep, this needs to be the next one we do." Are you kidding me? Like the whole reason I think I was obsessed with Pirates of the Caribbean was Curse of the Black Pearl or whatever, where it's nighttime and or at sundown and they turn into skeletons. So cool. So people claim to have seen skeletal soldiers marching from the woods dressed in tattered red coats and carrying weapons or lanterns. Witnesses report the thudding of military drums and the clanking of weapons as the soldiers make their eternal, mournful march. I had to read through this encounter I'm about to tell you about 3 times just so my brain could absorb the madness. But setting the scene. One particularly grim tale comes from the avid duck hunter Henry Forrest. While hunting along White Creek, he spotted what he thought were ducks on the water. When he raised his gun to take a shot, the ducks revealed themselves to be the tops of military helmets, followed by angry British soldiers in red coats.
It's like, hey, that's just a bird, but wait, actually, it's the military.
And yeah, I imagine creepily rising up the tops of their heads and ugh, terrifying.
It's like a movie. Yeah, I could see it perfectly in my head.
Also, if it is dark enough and you can't tell, a metal helmet situation from a feathered animal, maybe it's time to wrap it up for the night?
Yeah, like, did he even have binoculars?
I don't think so. I mean, that was my other thing. Depending on how far away you are, that sort of thing. I don't know. But also, if you're in a marsh, you're not going to think it's anything but, maybe a rock. Maybe if they're not thinking it's a duck, you're not going to expect a soldier's hat. So Henry Forrest was obviously terrified. He runs into the woods only to encounter another redcoat. Henry threatened to shoot, and the soldier reportedly replied, "You shoot, and the devil's curse to you and your traitor's breed." Probably not understanding the meaning, as I didn't really understand exactly what that meant either. And in pure fear, Henry pulled the trigger, but his gun jammed. He tried again, and it still wouldn't fire. In a final attempt, he just threw the gun at the apparition and ran for his life. I would probably do the same. I mean, what else are you going to do? I mean, you just chuck it and run, I guess.
You know what year this was? Is this like a recent thing?
I'm pretty sure it was between the 1930s to 1950s, but I couldn't tell you an exact year.
Gotcha. I was not expecting them to be apparitions. I thought this was actually happening.
Oh, no, gosh, no. No, these are ghosts. These are ghostly figures.
Okay. It's like, wow, that would be shocking.
These are, yes, ghosts popping out of a marsh and threatening him. So there is some credence, at least, historically to these stories regarding so many people seeing pirates. Piracy in the Chesapeake Bay was a very real threat during the 17th and early 18th centuries. Pirates such as Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, and Stede Bonnet occasionally operated in mid Atlantic waters, raiding merchant ships and hiding loot along secluded inlets and marshes. Historical records from colonial Virginia describe pirates' attacks, shipwrecks, and stolen cargo, definitely leading some plausibility to the local legends of treasure guarding ghosts and apparitions in the area. However, the piracy of Chesapeake Bay did not end in the colonial era. During my research, I learned all about a whole different type of piracy that happened actually after the Revolutionary War. At the turn of the 20th century, the region saw a new form of piracy during the so called Oyster Wars. With Chesapeake Bay oysters supplying nearly half the world's demand, oyster pirates raided protected oyster beds under the cover of night, clashing violently with each other, and even getting a maritime oyster navy involved. So it was such an issue. A local state, I think it was Maryland, they developed their own oyster police force, and it was just intense. They fought with guns, boats, even cannons, showing that piracy in the bay wasn't just about gold in the 1600s. So jumping back onto the, colonial era piracy where majority of the apparitions are focused, one specifically recounted story behind the traditional lore is regarding King Charles II. So, fearing he might have to flee England, he wanted to ensure he had the resources to rebuild his life in the colonies. In 1651, a ship carrying his valuables sailed toward Jamestown when a storm hit and pushed it off course into White Creek. The ship was attacked by pirates who killed the crew and stole the king's possessions, hiding them somewhere in the nearby forest, aka Old House Woods. What happened to the pirates afterwards is unclear. Some say they were caught and executed, while others believe they died at sea. The ghosts of the pirates are said to wander the woods, searching for the treasure they hid too well, while the spirits of the slayed crew protect the loot. Some versions say only the pirates roam, doomed to guard the treasure they never reclaimed in life. I love the idea of walking, maybe you're doing the wildlife and bird trail, and just somewhere in the nearby distance, there's two different sets of opposing ghost parties just beefing over some treasure at the same time. I like the idea of two ghosts having conflict with each other, but not you necessarily. You're just like, okay.
You're just the onlooker. Continue.
Yeah, there's a red cockaded woodpecker. Yeah, let me mind my business.
It's like they look over at you and you're like, "Oh," just, like, looks the other direction.
Yeah, I love the idea that the lore that they're arguing with each other about treasure. So, in the 1920s, a man reported that a group of men carrying lanterns approached him. As they came closer, he realized they weren't human, or at least not anymore. They were skeletons wearing old armor. Paralyzed with fear, he watched as one skeleton drew a large ancient sword and waved it at him. Terrified, he ran. This wasn't the only sighting of skeletal soldiers. Another man experiencing car trouble along Old House Woods Road reported that a skeleton in old armor approached him and asked, "Is this the King's Highway? I've lost my ship."
So casual. Like, this skeleton isn't just talking to you asking for directions.
I want to know how much skeletal versus how much human apparition. Is there, like, what's the opacity level, you know?
Right. Is it like Pirates of the Caribbean where you can kinda still see some flesh?
That's what I'm trying to figure out because some were described as skeletal, ghostly apparitions, and then others are just, they're straight up skeletons.
Or I'm thinking of Halloween Town, the taxi driver.
Yeah, that is exactly what was in my brain when I said reported that a skeleton. That's exactly what I thought. So, this King's Highway. I was like, okay, that's interesting. I did research, what the King's Highway is. Is it actually a thing? What is this about? So it turns out the King's Highway was a historic colonial post and trade route that connected the colonies and improved both communication and commerce. The route was ordered by King Charles II during the 1600s to make postal delivery easier. They used pre-existing indigenous trails to form an eventually paved route that supported stagecoaches and wagons that extended from Boston all the way down to Charleston. The development of this highway allowed for safer travel on land compared to sailing down the coast and the Atlantic as a way of transport, with the Chesapeake Bay region being infamous for its shifting sandbars, unpredictable storms, and dangerously crowded shipping channels, resulting in countless shipwrecks in the area. So again, it's very much all these stories have grains of historic context to them that I find really fascinating. So ghostly and skeletal figures aren't the only supernatural remnants of the area's long history with battles and pirates. Several sightings of ghost ships have been reported off the bay. In the 19th century, a fisherman named Ben Farabee was out on White's Creek when he saw a huge three-masted ghost galleon on the water. So, picture that ship from Pirates of the Caribbean. I didn't know what a three-masted ghost galleon was, and I looked it up and yeah, Pirates of the Caribbean ship. So, typical pirate ship. He saw lanterns glowing on its deck and ghostly figures looking out to sea, seemingly unaware of his presence. As the ship continued to approach him and seemed ready to collide with him, Farabee tried calling out, waving his hands, probably super freaked out. They're about to crash. There was no response, though. Right at what would have been that moment of impact, the ship rose into the air and floated over his head. It continued toward the beach, gaining elevation until it drifted above the trees. Farabee watched in horror as ghostly rope ladders were tossed over the side and spectral men carrying tools climbed down.
Now that is actually shocking. That would be so scary.
Right, you're just trying to catch some fish and you have this huge ship. It's mind boggling.
It's like you're just out there minding your business, and then all of a sudden the ship is going over you and they're climbing down this ladder at you. What do you do?
I guess I just go back to fishing. Like, what do you do? It's not my business. I don't know.
Same thing where you look at the ship and you kinda, like, look back at the water like, "I didn't see anything."
They've gotta get that treasure. So these ghost ships have been seen on and off for generations, with stories of pirates descending from them to search for lost treasure. It's been recounted numerous times. Definitely not a one-time occurrence. The treasure is apparently buried near Cow Hole or Cow Pit, once a grazing area for cattle that is now part of the swampy marsh, and the Cow Hole has actually been reported as being unfrozen even when the entire rest of the country is an ice block. Many people have tried to find this cow hole or cow pit, whatever you want to call it, without much success, either because of the sparrow-sized mosquitoes or because of ghostly, apparitions scaring them off. And ghostly pirates, aren't the only ones searching for treasure out here. Everyday treasure hunters have attempted to explore the woods, only to flee in fear. Among the groups investigating the area, Virginia Paranormal reported discovering old coins in Old House Woods, possibly connected to the treasure. The coins are said to date back to the 17th century and are Spanish in origin, giving further weight to the legend. And there is a photo of them. They kind of announced it on Facebook. They announced that someone had discovered these coins. It was not their group, they were just reporting it. Some were really excited by these findings, others thought it was a hoax. The coins to me, I mean, the photo I saw, they did look after I, looked into what an actual old Spanish coin would look like. It did look like it, but who knows? Especially with internet and AI and everything these days, it's so hard to tell. In the area, though, you might encounter more than treasure-seeking pirates or a ghost ship on the horizon. You may also meet the Storm Woman. She's believed to have lost her husband at sea and is seen wearing a faded nightgown, also known as, classic ghostly apparition. I'm assuming that nightgown is also white, though I can't say for sure, but isn't it always a lady in white? She appears before storms and strong winds, sometimes floating above the woods, screaming warnings to sailors. Her scream is described as a wailing, painfully loud and difficult to bear. This woman may not be a spirit after all, with some likening her to a banshee instead of a tortured ghost, which is consistent with her foreboding wail that echoes in the ears of those that hear her. If she is a banshee, she is not a human spirit after all, but a fae or fairy spirit or otherworldly being. The woods really has everything. Moving on from the Storm Woman, we also have ghost guardians of the region, including ghost animals. We have black ghost horses and dogs attacking people. Some say the dogs leap at people and damage their cars, leaving claw marks. In news articles, some of the apparitions of dogs were described as headless. Ghostly crows are said to cackle from the treetops, and if that isn't enough to scare you away, there are even reports of headless cows roaming the area.
I can't even picture what a headless cow looks like.
Yeah, I'm not really sure, but I do want to know why they're headless.
Horrified. I think out of this whole thing, this headless cow thing has got me.
Yeah, that's what really does it for you, for sure. The skeleton pirates, really fine, no big deal, whatever. The headless cows, that's where we draw the line. So, if the headless cows aren't enough to scare you, consider the words of Jesse Hudgens, a Matthew Courthouse merchant who lived near the woods and was featured in a 1926 Baltimore Sun article titled Ghost Guards of Old House Woods. Hudgens claimed to have seen ghosts there dozens of times, starting in childhood. that were not only scary to him, but also his beloved horses. He warned, quote, "Old House Woods is haunted. My advice to you is keep away from there. You can't defy the guardian spirits that watch over the place and get away with it." We recommend following Jesse's advice. Stay out of these haunted woods, avoid those headless cows, and it's also privately owned, so
But nothing's stopping you from walking along the road and witnessing orbs and headless cows.
no, people encourage walking along the road or the nearby, that kind of leans up to it. The Haven Beach is public access, the White Creek area. Yeah, it's just a very active area. So much different stuff going on. I would 10,000% go to this area. Not the private property woods itself, but, the surrounding area for the birding trails, the marshy, swampy habitats. I'm all for if I can see a skeleton pirate.
Yes, same. I'm actively in my head planning this whole trip. We'll get an Airbnb. We'll go bird watching. We'll go out at nighttime, walk along the road, not into the forest. And I'm all for it. Let's plan it next year.
For sure. And there's so much like Virginia and any of those really, old states there along the East Coast. They have so much going on as far as, haunted activities, paranormal encounters.
Yeah, you have the wildlife and the ghosts. What more could you want? All right, so let's do the scare scale next. So basically, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not scary and 10 being you're going to pee your pants scary, where do you land with this?
There's so many different, aspects of it overall, but I'd say overall like 7 out of 10. If the skeleton pirates are just looking for treasure, doing their thing, minding their business, I'm fine with that. But if they're coming up to me with swords, I'd rather they didn't.
While I do agree with that, especially the sword thing, I am opposite on this one. I think it's more of a 3 for me. Yeah, which is interesting because for Dogman, it was opposite this, but yeah, like, this is scary and all, but I think knowing that like, going into it at least, if you know there are ghosts in the area, then you can kind of just observe and be like, "Oh my gosh, like, that's a ghost." I can imagine if you didn't know, though, the history and the lore around the area, it would be very frightening to see a skeleton with a sword.
That's true. I guess that is kind of what I was thinking. Like, yeah, if I didn't know there were skeletons in the area, terrifying. But since we did this, I know. Definitely alleviates some of the scare factor. I'd be a little excited, but also scared, but, respectful at the same time.
100%.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us this week. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and give us a follow and subscribe to our podcast. You can also email your spooky stories or any listener story suggestions you may have to natureobscurapod@gmail.com.
Stay obscure, Earthlings.
Transmission ending.